This program covers Camp MacCall today. Today, Camp MacCall plays a new role. During World War II, it was designed specifically to train airborne troops. Today, it goes beyond that goal, with advanced training of airborne soldiers to qualify them as members of U.S. Army Special Forces teams and Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations teams. Training at Camp MacCall is done under the direction of the U.S. Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center and School, Fort Bragg. While our main emphasis is on the well-known Special Forces trained by the 1st Battalion at the school, the 3rd Battalion trains Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations there also. Camp MacCall now encompasses some 8,000 acres of training area within the camp. There are 8 major training sites within its borders. Sim City is a simulated residential town where training involves close-quarter combat areas where simulated ammunition allows Army weapons to function similar to paintball-type weapons. Pain created when you are hit, however, is not simulated, just so you will know you have been hit. MacCall Army Airfield is still active with 2 5,000-foot runways. A 3rd runway is used for other operations. Troops can be picked up here and returned from an exercise. All military services make use of the airfield. Any civilian use would only be because of an emergency. The Snyder Base Camp is a training site for Special Forces engineers. They practice field construction skills and development of secure base camps. They are also trained in demolitions and are actually more interested in blowing up things than in building them. The road training facility is the main living compound for soldiers and contains all the necessary facilities to maintain them and their instructors. The Special Forces Training Battalion is located here. It is named in honor of Colonel Nick Rowe, who escaped from a North Vietnamese prison camp after more than 5 years of captivity. In the early 1980s, he was brought to Camp MacCall to establish the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, or SEER training. He wrote the guidelines for what to do if captured by enemy forces, and students are still taught according to this basic instruction. Because of his importance to the U.S. military, he was assassinated by enemy forces in the Philippines in 1989. Forward Operating Base Freedom is a facility set up like a forward operating base would be in a foreign country from which U.S. troops would operate and maintain a secure base. Freedom Village simulates an actual village in a foreign country where soldiers encounter role players who interact with them to test their ability to operate in a foreign language and challenging, culturally diverse situations. SEER training is conducted at several sites on Camp MacCall, where instructors teach soldiers survival fieldcraft, evasion planning, and resistance and escape techniques. The Luzon drop zone is part of Camp MacCall, where the division area was once located during World War II, and where troops in training were housed. Today it is a huge field with a clay runway down the middle. Paratroopers from Fort Bragg are dropped here on a regular basis in training. The Luzon drop zone is not very far from Aberdeen as the crow flies. This sign marks the Luzon drop zone on 15501, so you won't be frightened should a very large aircraft pass over the highway at low level. From the highway, the Luzon drop zone seems to stretch to the horizon. These are paratroopers coming down, barely visible in the circle, giving you an idea of the vastness of the drop zone. Today, every Special Forces soldier who earns the right to wear the Green Beret has passed a selection process and received training at Camp MacCall. More recently, Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations soldiers must pass a selection process at Camp MacCall also. Special Forces soldiers are force multipliers sent into foreign countries as masters of training and organizing insurgents, surrogate fighters, native forces, and foreign armies. Their presence somewhere may or may not be publicly known. To become a Green Beret, one goes through a 6-phase qualification course. Pre-phase assessment and selection is a physically and mentally demanding course to see if a soldier would be a suitable candidate for Special Forces. At the end of the 19 days, they know if someone will qualify for training. During that assessment, soldiers are put through grueling physical tests. The obstacle course at Camp MacCall is called Nasty Nick in honor of Colonel Rowe. It is the toughest, most extensive one in the U.S. Army. If you don't get hurt there, you will hurt when you finish the course, and you are timed on the course. Special Forces candidates are expected to travel great distances cross-country with a 50-pound rucksack and perform extra tasks along the way. Individual performance is one thing and teamwork is another. Special Forces soldiers work in small teams where everyone's effort counts. This exercise tests for upper and lower body strength and physical endurance. You better not have any weaknesses here. Phase 1 is a 6-week course about the standards expected of you in reviewing small unit tactics and land navigation. Phase 2 includes conducting raids, ambushes, patrols, and other strikes against enemy forces, all planned and executed by the students themselves. The SEER course is part of this phase, which includes camouflaging oneself, hopefully without picking up too many ticks and redbugs. To survive, nasty eats are not all bad if you want to survive. Soldiers learn to communicate with hand signals and noises to suit the situation and be able to improvise in making whatever tools necessary for survival. They try to avoid capture if at all possible at Camp Mackall during the SEER phase of training. Of course, instructors make sure that isn't possible before they force soldiers into captivity. Phase 3 is military operational specialty training. Even though you have a specialty, you have to be cross-trained to a certain degree in all specialties in case one member of the team is injured and you have to fulfill his job also. At the end of all training, the unconventional warfare culmination exercise called Robin Sage begins as Phase 4. First with some 2 weeks of planning at Camp Mackall before entering Pineland for 19 days, where soldiers put to practical use all that training. 8 times a year, classes of 100 students, each spread out in small teams over 15 counties in central North Carolina, as shown, covering some 50,000 square miles. Supporting that effort are 200 other military personnel. They also interact with local civilian volunteers. Robin Sage has endured for some 50 years here in the fictional People's Republic of Pineland. Should you ever find yourself in a Pineland camp, you will be expected to know the Pineland Pledge of Allegiance, which may sound familiar to some of you. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun doth shine, where the wheat grows strong and the strong grow great. Here's to Pineland, our down-home state. Viva la Pineland! Every skill learned in training will be tested, often not as expected, on Robin Sage. Although strenuous for these physically fit students, Robin Sage is more of a mental challenge. Critiques of action can be brutal. Students are usually 12 men to a team. They approach a guerrilla camp of soldiers who nowadays are just at the beginning of Special Forces training, so they will know what to expect if they continue with Special Forces. Depending on the situation, Special Forces students may enter an area by air or by land and try to gain acceptance of those they are about to train for liberation. Phase 5 includes 24 weeks of intense language training. Proficiency in at least one foreign language is part of being a Green Beret. Arabic, Spanish, Chinese, and Russian are just some of the 13 languages learned. Phase 6 is graduation. One of the most challenging aspects of training is becoming proficient in a foreign language in 24 weeks. It is required for the last phase, graduation. The willingness of local residents to assist in Robin Sage and other military exercises today continues a tradition of cooperation which goes back before World War II, making it a unique, long-standing, proud relationship. Camp Mackall has had a rebirth since the latter part of the 20th century. It has entered a new dawn of specialized military training, now recognized as being just as important in its own time as that accomplished here during World War II. In recent years, Fort Bragg has again asked for our assistance and cooperation in protecting the mission of Camp Mackall by conserving adjacent lands as agricultural. Robin Sage for Special Forces and Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations in our local communities have become part of those communities themselves. In cooperation with the mission of Fort Bragg and Camp Mackall, we welcome the opportunity to cooperate now and in the future to ensure their success.